You ever trusted someone so much you'd hand them your life savings? Well, I did. And let me tell you, what happened next will have you questioning your own family, and maybe even your sanity. What would you do if your own daughter vanished overnight, with $15 million you'd hidden for your dream house? Wait till you hear what I found in the chest instead. Trust me, you won't see this twist coming. You know, every woman I've ever met has that one dream she tucks away in her heart, like a favorite recipe card or a faded photograph. Mine, it was always a house by the lake. Not just any house, mind you, but the kind with a wraparound porch, creaky rocking chairs, and a view that could make even the most stubborn pessimist believe in magic. I'd spent years clipping pictures from magazines, sketching out floor plans on napkins, and daydreaming about lazy afternoons with a good book and a glass of sweet tea. It was my someday dream, the one I'd whisper to myself on tough days, or when the world felt a little too heavy. So, when the stars finally aligned and I was able to withdraw $15 million from my investments, yes, you heard that right, $15 million, I felt like I'd just won the lottery. I could practically hear the universe cheering me on. I'd worked hard, saved smart, and now at last, it was my turn to live a little. I could almost smell the fresh paint and hear the laughter of grandkids running through the halls of my future home. But here's where things get interesting. You see, I've never been one to trust banks. Call me old-fashioned, but after hearing one too many horror stories about hackers, identity theft, and that time my friend Linda's account got frozen for suspicious activity. She was just buying a new blender, for heaven's sake. I decided I'd rather keep my money where I could see it. And as for my neighbor Carol, well, let's just say she's the type who'd notice if I so much as changed my curtains, let alone deposited a fortune. She's got binoculars on her kitchen counter and a nose for gossip that could put the National Enquirer to shame. So, what's a woman to do with $15 million and a healthy dose of paranoia? I did what any reasonable, slightly eccentric woman would do. I hid the money in my daughter's old toy chest. Now, before you start shaking your head, let me explain. This wasn't just any toy chest. It was a battered pink and white box covered in faded unicorn stickers, with a secret compartment I'd installed myself back when Emily was little. She used to hide her treasures in there, plastic tiaras, friendship bracelets, and the occasional contraband candy bar. That chest had seen more secrets than a confessional booth. I figured, who would ever think to look there? It was the perfect hiding spot, innocent, nostalgic, and tucked away in the guest room closet, behind a pile of old board games and winter coats. Besides, Emily and her husband Jake were coming to visit for the weekend. They'd be sleeping in that very room, and I thought, what could possibly go wrong? I mean, Emily's always been a good kid. Responsible, trustworthy, the kind of daughter who still calls me every Sunday just to check in. And Jake, well, he's harmless. A little scatterbrained maybe, but sweet as pie. The night before they arrived, I found myself standing in the guest room, staring at that old chest. I ran my hand over the peeling stickers, remembering the days when Emily would sit cross-legged on the floor, lost in her own little world. I smiled, thinking how funny life is, how the things we once thought were just for play can end up holding our most precious secrets. I carefully placed the bag of money inside the secret compartment, making sure it was tucked away just right. My heart was pounding, but I told myself it was just nerves. After all, this was my dream, my future, and I was finally taking control. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every possible scenario in my head. What if someone broke in? What if I forgot where I'd hidden it? What if Carol somehow sniffed out my secret and showed up with a metal detector? But by morning, I'd convinced myself I was being ridiculous. Emily and Jake arrived just after breakfast, lugging suitcases and a box of homemade cookies. We hugged, laughed, and caught up on all the little things, work, friends, the latest family gossip. It felt good to have them home, to fill the house with noise and warmth again. As the day went on, I found myself glancing at the guest room door more than once. I wondered if Emily would notice anything unusual, if she'd sense that her old toy chest was now the most valuable thing in the house. But she didn't say a word. She and Jake settled in, unpacked, and even teased me about my hoarder closet when they saw the pile of board games. I just smiled and shrugged, feeling a little thrill every time I thought about my secret. That evening, we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the trees. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. I thought about telling her, about sharing my plans for the dream house, maybe even letting her in on my little secret. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was just the joy of having a secret all to myself for once. As I went to bed that night, I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. I was on the brink of something big, something life-changing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that, in trying to protect my dream, I might have set something in motion I couldn't control. Still, I told myself, what could possibly go wrong? And with that, I drifted off to sleep, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I've always said that motherhood is not for the faint of heart, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the shock I woke up to that morning. The sun was barely peeking through the curtains when I shuffled into the kitchen, expecting to find Emily making her famous cinnamon coffee and Jake fumbling with the toaster. Instead, the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. I called out their names, half expecting them to jump out from behind the couch with a surprise, or at least a groggy good morning. But there was nothing. No laughter, no footsteps, not even the sound of Jake's off-key humming. Just silence. At first, I thought maybe they'd gone for an early walk. Emily always did love the morning air, and Jake, bless his heart, would follow her anywhere, even if it meant pretending to enjoy exercise. But as I wandered from room to room, a knot of worry started to form in my stomach. Their suitcases were gone. The guest room was spotless, the bed made with military precision, something Emily never did unless she was trying to impress me. The only thing left was that old toy chest, sitting in the corner like a silent witness to whatever had happened. I tried to stay calm, telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe they'd gone out for breakfast. Maybe they'd left early to beat the traffic. But then I saw my phone blinking on the kitchen counter. One new message. I picked it up, and there it was. A text from Emily. "Thanks, Mom. We can live our dreams now." My heart dropped straight into my slippers. I mean, I love a good surprise as much as the next person, but this? This was a heart attack in a text message. My hand started to shake as I read it again, hoping I'd misunderstood. But no, it was clear as day. My daughter and her husband had vanished, and they were thanking me for it. Panic set in. I raced back to the guest room, my mind spinning with questions. Had they really taken the money? Was this some kind of elaborate joke? I flung open the toy chest, half expecting to find the bag right where I'd left it. But it was gone. The secret compartment was empty, the faded unicorn stickers staring up at me like they knew something I didn't. For a moment, I just stood there staring into the empty chest, feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Did I just get robbed by my own daughter? Was this some kind of twisted prank? I tried to remember every conversation from the night before, every look, every laugh. Had Emily seemed nervous? Had Jake been acting strange? I replayed the whole weekend in my head, searching for clues. But nothing stood out. They'd been their usual selves. Chatty, affectionate, maybe a little distracted, but nothing out of the ordinary. I'll admit, for a split second, I thought about calling the police. I even picked up the phone and started dialing, but then I stopped. What would I say? "Hello, officer. I think my daughter just stole $15 million from my toy chest." I could practically hear the laughter on the other end of the line. Besides, Emily always did have a flair for the dramatic. She was the kind of kid who once faked a broken arm to get out of gym class and who staged an elaborate runaway at age 10, only to hide in the backyard with a bag of Oreos. And Jake? Well, let's just say he's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. The man once tried to fix a leaky faucet with duct tape and a prayer. Still, this was different. This was real money, my money, the money I'd saved and dreamed about for years. The money that was supposed to buy my dream house, my fresh start. I felt betrayed, hurt, and more than a little foolish. How could I have been so naive? How could I have trusted them with something so important? I sat down on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, and let the tears come. Not big, dramatic sobs, but the quiet, aching kind that sneak up on you when you least expect it. After a while, the fear started to give way to anger. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made for Emily over the years. The late nights, the scraped knees, the endless school projects. I thought about the trust I'd placed in her, the faith I'd had that she would always do the right thing. And now she'd run off with my life savings, leaving nothing but a cryptic text and an empty chest. But even as the anger bubbled up, a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispered that there had to be more to the story. Emily wasn't a thief. She was my daughter, my flesh and blood. Maybe she'd made a mistake, or maybe there was some explanation I hadn't thought of yet. Maybe, just maybe, this was all some elaborate misunderstanding. I spent the rest of the day pacing the house, checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping for another message, a phone call, anything. I replayed every memory, every conversation, searching for answers. I even found myself laughing through the tears at the absurdity of it all. Only in my family, I thought, could something like this happen. Only in my life could a dream house turn into a missing persons case. As the sun set and the house grew dark, I realized I had a choice to make. I could let fear and anger consume me, or I could hold on to hope. Hope that Emily would call, that there was a reason for all of this, that maybe, just maybe, my dream wasn't lost after all. And as I crawled into bed that night, clutching my phone like a lifeline, I whispered a silent prayer. Please, let this be a joke. Let my daughter come home. And with that, I drifted off into a restless sleep, not knowing what the next day would bring, but determined to face it with the same stubborn hope that had carried me this far. Because if there's one thing I've learned in all my years, it's that family has a way of surprising you, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, but always in ways you never see coming. Now here's where the story really takes a turn. After a night of tossing and turning, my mind running wild with every possible scenario, kidnapping, betrayal, maybe even a secret lottery win, I woke up feeling like I'd aged 10 years overnight. My heart was still pounding, but somewhere in the back of my mind, a little voice kept whispering, "This can't be real. Not Emily, not Jake." I shuffled into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine. Yes, it was 9 a.m., but honestly, who's judging at this point? Then sat down at the table, staring at the empty spot where Emily's laughter should have been. I let out a long sigh, the kind that comes from deep in your bones, and tried to make sense of it all. That's when it hit me. Something about the whole situation just didn't add up. Emily was impulsive, sure, and Jake was always up for an adventure, but neither of them had ever shown a hint of dishonesty. If anything, they were almost too honest, the kind of people who'd return a lost wallet with every penny accounted for. I thought back to all those years of raising Emily, the endless heart-to-hearts, the late-night talks about dreams and disappointments. She was a dreamer, yes, but she was also my daughter. And if there's one thing I knew for sure, it was that she loved me, even if she had a funny way of showing it sometimes. So I decided to do what any mother would do in my situation. I went back to the scene of the crime. I marched straight into the guest room, determined to look for any clue, any sign that this was all just a big misunderstanding. The toy chest sat there, innocent as ever, its faded unicorn stickers winking at me in the morning light. I knelt down, opened the lid, and stared into the empty compartment. For a moment I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. But then something caught my eye. A tiny scrap of paper wedged in the corner, almost hidden beneath the lining. Curious, I reached in and pulled it out. It was a grocery list, written in Emily's familiar handwriting. Milk, eggs, bread, wine, for Mom, chocolate. I couldn't help but smile. Leave it to Emily to think of me, even in the middle of a heist. I looked closer and realized there were more scraps of paper tucked away in the chest. Old notes, Monopoly money, even a faded get-out-of-jail-free card. My confusion deepened. Where was the bag? Where was the money? That's when I remembered. I'd never actually put the real money in the chest. In all my paranoia about banks and nosy neighbors, I'd decided at the last minute to stash the cash somewhere even safer, somewhere only I knew about. The bag in the chest was just a decoy, a little insurance policy in case anyone ever got too curious. I'd filled it with Monopoly money, old grocery lists, and, just for fun, a note that read, Nice try, kiddo. The real treasure is family. Call your mother. As the realization dawned on me, I started to laugh. Not just a little chuckle, but a full-on, belly-shaking laugh that echoed through the empty house. All that worry, all that fear, and for what? Emily and Jake had run off with a bag full of play money and reminders to buy milk. I could just picture their faces when they opened it. Emily's eyes wide with shock, Jake scratching his head in confusion. The image was so vivid, so perfectly ridiculous, that I couldn't help but laugh even harder. I poured myself another glass of wine. Still 9 a.m., but at this point it felt justified, and sat back, letting the relief wash over me. The fear and anger that had gripped me the night before melted away, replaced by a sense of mischief and satisfaction. I'd outsmarted my own daughter, and in doing so, I'd given her a little taste of her own medicine. After all those sleepless nights when she was a teenager, sneaking out, breaking curfew, testing every boundary I set, it felt good to turn the tables. Just this once. But more than that, I realized I'd given Emily and Jake something even more valuable than money, a reminder of what really matters. They were always chasing big dreams, always looking for the next adventure. But sometimes, in all that chasing, it's easy to lose sight of the things that truly count. Family, love, the simple joys of being together. Maybe, just maybe, this little prank would help them see that. I thought about calling Emily right then and there, but I decided to let her stew for a little while longer. Let her wonder, let her laugh, let her realize that her mother was still one step ahead. I knew she'd call eventually, she always did. And when she did, we'd have a good laugh about it. Maybe even share a glass of wine. At a more respectable hour, of course. As I sat there, basking in the glow of my own cleverness, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The dream house could wait. The money was safe. And my family, for all their quirks and misadventures, was still the greatest treasure of all. Sometimes life throws you a curveball, but if you can find the humor in it, if you can hold on to the people you love, then you're richer than you ever imagined. So I raised my glass to the empty room, to Emily and Jake, to all the mothers who've ever outsmarted their kids, and to the beautiful, messy, unpredictable adventure that is family. And as I took a sip, I couldn't help but think, maybe the real dream isn't a house by the lake, but the laughter and love that fill it. It's funny how, after all the drama, the universe has a way of bringing things back to what really matters. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, the morning sun now high in the sky, when my phone finally rang. I didn't even have to look at the caller ID, I just knew it was Emily. There's a certain ring to a daughter's call after she's pulled a stunt like this, a mix of guilt and hope, like a kid who's been caught with her hand in the cookie jar but is hoping for a hug anyway. I answered on the first ring, trying to sound stern, but I couldn't keep the smile out of my voice. Well, 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 I said. Look who finally decided to call her old mother. On the other end, Emily was a mess of laughter and tears, her words tumbling out so fast I could barely keep up. Mom, you got us good. We were halfway to Vegas before we realized we'd been played. Jake's still in shock. He keeps saying, your mom is a genius, Em, a real genius. I could hear Jake in the background, muttering something about Monopoly money and how he'd never trust a pink duffel bag again. I couldn't help but laugh, the kind of deep belly laugh that shakes the sadness right out of you. It felt so good to hear her voice, to know she was safe, to know that in the end we were all still on the same team. We spent the next hour on the phone, laughing and crying in equal measure. Emily apologized a dozen times, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't know what we were thinking. I guess we just got caught up in the idea of a fresh start, of chasing our dreams. But you reminded us what's really important. I told her not to worry, that I understood, that sometimes you have to go a little wild to remember where home really is. I even confessed that the whole thing had been a bit of payback for those teenage years when she'd kept me up at night, worrying about where she was and what she was doing. Consider us even, I said, and we both burst out laughing. We made plans for dinner that night, at my place, of course. I told her I'd make her favorite, chicken pot pie, and that she'd better bring Jake and an appetite. And no more running off with my toy chest, I teased. Next time, I might fill it with something even more surprising. She promised, between giggles, that she'd learned her lesson. "You're the queen of surprises, Mom. I'll never doubt you again." As I hung up the phone, I felt a wave of relief and gratitude wash over me. The house, which had felt so empty just hours before, now seemed to hum with anticipation. I started bustling around the kitchen, pulling out ingredients, setting the table, humming to myself. There's something about preparing a meal for your family that feels like a kind of magic, a way of weaving love into every bite. I thought about all the dinners we'd shared over the years, all the stories, the laughter, the tears. This one, I knew, would be special. And as for the 15 million? Well, let's just say it's safe and sound, tucked away in a place only I know. Maybe next time I'll choose a hiding spot that doesn't come with unicorn stickers and childhood memories. Or maybe I won't hide it at all. Maybe I'll use it to finally build that dream house by the lake, the one with the big porch and the rocking chairs. But the truth is, after everything that happened, I realized that the real jackpot isn't money or houses or even dreams come true. It's the people you share them with. It's the family that drives you crazy and makes you laugh and sometimes, just sometimes, reminds you that life is meant to be lived with a little mischief and a lot of love. That evening, Emily and Jake arrived, looking sheepish but happy. We hugged for a long time, the kind of hug that says, "I forgive you, I love you, and I'm so glad you're home." Over dinner, we retold the story from every angle, each of us adding our own twist, our own punchline. Jake admitted he'd been convinced they were about to start a new life in style, only to find himself holding a bag of Monopoly money and a note that made him laugh so hard he nearly cried. Emily said she'd never felt so relieved and so loved at the same time. "You got us, Mom. You really got us." We talked late into the night, the way families do when they've been through something big and come out the other side stronger. We made plans for the future, maybe a family vacation, maybe even a little help for Emily and Jake to chase their dreams, but this time with honesty and a little more wisdom. I looked around the table, at the faces I loved most in the world, and felt a deep, abiding sense of peace. As I cleared the dishes and turned out the lights, I thought about all the twists and turns life had thrown my way. I thought about dreams, how they change, how they grow, how sometimes the best ones are the ones you never saw coming. And I realized that, in the end, the real riches aren't found in a bank account or a hidden chest. They're found in the laughter, the forgiveness, and the love that fill a home. So if you ever find yourself chasing a dream, or hiding a fortune, or just trying to keep your family together, remember this: the greatest treasures are the ones you can't put a price on. And sometimes a little mischief is the best way to remind us all what's truly valuable. So, ladies, what would you have done? Ever been outsmarted by your own kids? If you enjoyed this wild ride, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories, laughs, and a little wisdom from one mom to another. And remember, sometimes the best treasures aren't found in a chest, they're found around your dinner table.